So, Robert, hit it.
Well, I'm Robert Kiviat. I've done more shows about unexplained phenomena, especially about UFOs in the documentary specials network TV world, probably more than anybody. And when I say network, I mean broadcast network, over-the-air television. Usually that means Fox, NBC, CBS, or ABC. And in my case, it's mostly on the Fox network. And when the X-Files was popular, my shows were brought on by the Fox network to be the real unexplained phenomena investigations of UFOs and the like. And Fox wanted me to try to bring a truthfulness to this material, as opposed to what the X-Files was doing, which was more of like a, dramatization of what is about those stories. So overall, that was my main claim to fame in network TV. And most recently on NBC Universal Sci-Fi Channel, we did a show called Aliens on the Moon, The Truth Exposed, where we showed what we believe to be the first photographs ever of the Apollo missions, basically Apollo 8 through Apollo 17, where the Apollo astronauts shot what appears to be gigantic structures existing on the lunar surface that had been rumored for years to exist, but we were the first show to ever show those. And so what brought me here to UFO MegaCon is that they wanted me to talk about a lawsuit I have filed that started basically in 2018. I was basically brought into a company called InterNASA, that is a follow-on company from a group of people in Utah, where they were developing an anti-gravity device. And the reason why I was so fascinated was that the anti-gravity device that these Utah guys were developing was backed by a top scientist at the CIA, a guy named Ronald Pandolfi. And Ronald Pandolfi has been involved in a lot of interesting UFO-related investigations and things of that nature at the Weird Desk. The CIA has a division called the Weird Desk, where they look at all things of the unexplained and UFO-related kind of stories. And I felt that because this company in Utah, which was backed by a guy named Joe Firmage, had a lot of interest to me because I knew Joe Firmage. He had been around in the 1990s.
So you knew him before?
We were very aware of Joe Firmage at the Fox specials I did for back at the X-Files days. We were aware of him coming out in the mid-90s, 1996, 1997. He had been a very, very successful .com, probably earliest guy developing web designs for business in the world, really. And Joe had made a fortune. He decided to take that fortune he had really put together and use it for UFO research, which to me was just amazing back in the 90s. So I tracked his kind of career. And eventually in 2017, I was very intrigued by the fact that Joe Firmage was developing an anti-gravity device. It was a machine that could actually levitate, allegedly, off the ground without using any kind of known physics that we were aware of. And the more I talked to Joe, I realized he was backed by this Ronald Pandolfi, a CIA top scientist. And I said to myself, boy, if Joe is backed by him, maybe this could be real. So Joe and I talked, and basically toward the end of 2017, just when To the Stars Academy was kind of making their inroads in the world, New York Times is writing about this company backed by Hal Puthoff. And I found it fascinating that Hal Puthoff was backing To the Stars Academy because Hal Puthoff had been backing Joe Firmage in the earlier version of this anti-gravity device back in 2009, 2010. And Joe had a partner actually in 2009, 2010, also a Utah businessman. So all of this really kind of came together over the last year or so. I wasn't exactly clear of all the pieces, but when all the pieces became very clear to me, I realized that I was probably with the right group of people, that they were going to develop more or less an anti-gravity device, maybe utilizing what could be reverse engineered, thinking based on recovered UFOs. I wasn't quite sure, but Joe never made that clear. But what I did know that because the CIA was backing it, Hal Puthoff was clearly involved, as it appeared to me. I figured these people were very involved in this, and I started my job by literally signing a contract in 2018. I was to be the equivalent to the Stars Academy. I was going to be the TV producer because of all my shows I had done before, that I was going to bring this technology to the public. The way the deal was going to go down was I was going to develop in a separate division of this inter-NASA company that Joe Firmage was behind, that Ron Pandolfi at the CIA was more or less backing. I was going to be the guy to bring this to the world through news media, through TV series, through maybe movies, and it sounded a lot like To the Stars Academy. Let's remember, To the Stars Academy has a name very similar to Inter-NASA, because Inter-NASA, Joe Firmage's company, sounds like this: the International Academy of Science and Arts. Wow! Compare that to the Stars Academy. Hal Puthoff was the person involved in both companies. So you wonder, why is that? How could it be that both companies had a very similar kind of, if not name, concept, and the ideas were pretty similar? So I stayed focused on this company, and finally by 2018, middle of 2018, I had signed a contract to do this work. I had taken this concept to top networks in New York, top networks here in the Los Angeles area, and I realized I was doing my job, doing all the things that Joe Firmage wanted me to do, that Ron Pandolfi wanted me to do, but there was also somebody else in the background, a former congressman named Daniel Marriott of Utah, and he was backing the company but holding back the money. He was holding the company more or less ransom by saying, look, I'll back your company, I'll put the money in, maybe $1 million, maybe $2 million, to pay my salary, to pay a lot of other people's salaries, but he would only do that under certain conditions. First condition would be, basically, if the FBI and the SEC that were looking into Joe Firmage for previous issues, history he was dealing with, whatever he was doing, if I can convince Dan Marriott, former congressman, that there was no problem for Joe Firmage, he would be all on board, put his money in, pay the bills, take care of my salary, which, by the way, was now going into arrears. These arrears were, multiplying. I was basically owed $100,000 by the middle of 2018 for my salary, and I'd given up a Hollywood career, given up work, usually doing my usual television production kind of work. Sure, I was showing this idea to TV people that we had a company, we were developing an anti-gravity device, but a lot of that was falling apart because they were not paying me. Dan Marriott, the former congressman, sort of felt like he had to do something, so he started to pay for the device, this anti-gravity device, to be developed, and also pay me a little bit of money. So he paid me $5,000. He was trying to say, look, I'm trying my best, but his concept was, if you could satisfy me that there was no problem with the FBI, no problem with the SEC, and that Ron Pandolfi was really involved in the CIA, he'd put his investment that he promised in. Now the trick of this was that Joe Firmage thought he was getting that money in late December of 2017, before the company was ever formed really, so that he could pay me. But because Dan Marriott decided to hold back that money, these arrears started to grow. And as they grew, I was getting much concerned. I mean, I put a lot of time in, traveled to the East Coast, paid my own travel expenses, literally flew in the operative for Ron Pandolfi from the CIA to Joe's house in Utah on my own nickel. So I was paying money out for the company, but I was getting paid zero or next to zero. So back by middle of 2018, my lawyer asked me, what do you want to do? And I said, well, look, let's give these people a little time. Let's see if we can figure out a way to make this work. At the same time, Dan Marriott, the former congressman, was saying things to me like, well, Bob, I'd put the money in if I could just get 8 feet of lift. Well, that meant that if we could get the device to lift off the ground 8 feet and hover, then he'd put his money in. Now, the concept was that I would get a TV show made where the public would finally see this gravity-controlled device lift off the ground. So Dan was saying, look, if you could finally get that to happen, then I'll put the money in. And I said to Dan Marriott, Dan, if we got 8 feet of lift, we wouldn't need you. We'd have everybody coming to us for this investment in the technology. So it got to be a real tough issue for me. And finally, in 2018, I'll say by June, it turned out they were going to show it to some really, really high up people in the military-industrial complex in Colorado, it sounded like. But Joe could not get the device to perform by then. So everybody at the company called InterNASA went into what I would call deep, background research. They kind of shut things down, told me that all my efforts would have to be on hold, and if I wanted to get paid, I better just keep on moving forward, get a TV series made, figure it out. But they went dark. The word would be dark. And I was like, dark? So I started to call my attorney and say, look, I'm really getting screwed here. I put in nearly 7 months of work. And by the way, some of these days that I worked in the company would start at 9 o'clock in the morning. Joe would call me up from Utah and say, Robert, we have money coming in today. Don't worry. Get ready. You're going to get a wire transfer to cover your salary. Okay, so I would get more motivated to want to keep going. But I realized Joe was kind of creating a huge problem. And so sooner or later, I turned to my attorney and said, what do you want to do? And he said, well, let's give him a little more time. So finally, I reached out to this guy named Ron Pandolfi at the CIA. And I said, Ron, in email form, I need to be paid. I've worked my tail off here. It's October of 2018. We're getting close to the end of this year. I've not been paid. And he more or less said, let me see if I could help. I'll see what I can do. He never said he wasn't involved in the company. He never said he wasn't involved in any way, shape, and form. But he put a few little Band-Aids on this thing. He tried to figure out a way to give me a couple of bucks. It became kind of ridiculous. Finally, my lawyer said, what do you want to do? I said, you know what? I think we should sue him. I think we should sue all these people, bring them into court, try to figure out what's true about not only my salary getting paid, what's true about the anti-gravity device, what's true about UFOs. Is there a way that UFOs tie into this entire thing? And don't forget, the guy at the CIA was in charge of the weird desk. And the weird desk at the CIA is about UFOs, anti-gravity devices, and so those kind of things became my main issue. Was there a way to bring these people into court, not only get myself paid, but also bring truth out about the UFO issue and what the CIA seems to know? And so that is what the court case is about. We filed we filed in February. We waited as long as we could. We did all the negotiations we could figure out. We tried to see if Ron Pandolfi at the CIA would be able to put together some kind of a way to pay me for my efforts. And unfortunately, that has not happened. So we had to file suit. And I really tried everything I could to avoid it. But now that we filed suit, I have a court case on the books in California. We are now doing what's called processing, which means we're serving Joe Firmage, former Congressman Daniel Marriott, and Ron Pandolfi at the CIA, and we're basically bringing them into court, doing discovery, doing what's called, typical courtroom kind of vetting. And we hope that by putting these people on the stand, I'm the first person, I must say, that I can find on the record that ever had the reason to put these people on the stand under oath, especially at the CIA, and they would have to tell us what they know about UFOs. Now look, using the court case to get paid for my services per an employment contract that is bona fide and really legitimate, that's a way to get into the secrets about UFOs. Now, we're not quite sure if it'll play out perfectly, but we know that we'll be able to get people on the stand under oath. They're going to have to say the truth. And that means, by the way, the following people: Dan Marriott, Ron Pandolfi, Joe Firmage, maybe not in that order, but also people like Hal Puthoff, who have been involved in both Joe Firmage's company and Tom DeLonge to the Stars Academy's company. So by looking at both companies, we're able to figure out what's really going on with UFOs and the disclosure movement that is going on right now.
And you was telling me that you have a GoFundMe to help you put on that lawsuit, or?
Right. We have a lawyer right now representing me who is going to handle the case, but there's a lot of money required to do a law case that is going to involve the CIA operative named Ron Pandolfi, Joe Firmage, Daniel Marriott. Right now we're seeking money to help me fund the lawsuit. By funding the lawsuit, you're able to maybe reach a kind of level of disclosure about UFOs. Now, if we can reach a level of disclosure about UFOs through my lawsuit, that will extremely change the issue about whether or not UFOs are real or not. I really feel if more people look into my GoFundMe campaign, they're going to realize this is the one case that could actually crack into the UFO field. So I have a GoFundMe campaign. And by the way, GoFundMe campaigns are really like political campaigns. You're saying, look, I have a lawsuit. I'm trying to be funded to pay my lawyer, to pay what's called discovery fees. When you haul people into court, you have to pay for stenographers that literally type out everything. You have to do depositions. Depositions are long, endless kind of paperwork trails. This costs money. So I need people to help me with money. So I have a GoFundMe campaign. If you simply contact me at rkiviat@aol.com, that's my email address. I'll be able to give you more information about the GoFundMe campaign, give you the GoFundMe URL, and then you can go literally to my GoFundMe campaign. It's a website, and you can actually donate with your credit card or whatever, debit card. You can actually donate to my fund. It's very analogous to a political campaign. Like I'm running for office. I'm needing this money to run for office. I'm needing money to prosecute this case. I'm thinking more and more about growing this into a political campaign and running for a congressional seat in the House of Representatives. So more and more, I'm thinking more about this. And what's funny is Julian Assange, the guy sitting in London embassy, who is very much the guy behind WikiLeaks, he said a year or so ago that isn't it interesting that 1 out of 3 Americans believe UFOs could be real? If that's the case, that means 30% of the population could vote for somebody who's trying to get into this area. So I'm thinking more and more about taking my journalism career and take it into politics. So if you donate to my GoFundMe campaign, then I will have your email address. I'll know who you are. You could be a constituent of mine as I try to run for office in the next 2 years. So I think it's an interesting combination of things. And if you can do that, I would really appreciate it.
Cool. So I got one more question
Sure.
for you. So I know a little bit about you're involved in the latest anti-gravity device, through the filming of that, but I know a little bit about the one before. Are you telling me some of the same people minus Joe Firmage was involved in both campaigns?
It's a very, very touchy subject that a gentleman that was Joe Firmage's partner in 2009, 2010, who were trying to create this anti-gravity device in the earliest inception of this device. Now, this partner of Joe's is also a Utah businessman. He has asked me to try to honor an agreement we have, like a gentleman's agreement, that I'm not going to name him by name, because he has another business. It's not related to UFOs or anti-gravity devices, but he has a business that is really important to him and his family. So I said to myself, okay, I'll agree to that. And as a favor, he's going to maybe testify in court. And if he testifies in court, he's going to say that essentially, if he testifies for me in court, he's going to say that Joe Firmage and his anti-gravity device was backed by very major people in the military, in our government. The former head of the Weird Desk before Ron Pandolfi was a guy named Kit Green. Kit Green and Hal Puthoff both gave testimonials to Joe Firmage's earlier incarnation of this device 9 years ago, and the gentleman in Utah that was Joe's partner, he was very much behind the device. But he believes it was proven that Joe's device will not work. I don't know if that's true. It sounds like he thought it wouldn't work. it was proven that it wasn't working at the time. In other words, it was not lifting off the ground or the table they were trying to show it to be able to do. But that does not mean that, like a very famous history, Thomas Edison, who developed the light bulb, for many years he could not get it to work. 10,000 times he failed. But he lied to the media, he lied to people that he was getting it going. So just because someone can't get it going right now doesn't mean he won't get it going in the future. So we're going to find out how it goes in my court case. We're going to see how this gentleman from Utah that backed Joe Firmage, that gave him all the belief and then pulled out, we're going to find out how it all plays. We have To the Stars Academy, because Hal Puthoff, the same guy behind Joe Firmage's device back in 2009, is also there. And then of course we have this interesting disclosure period we're in right now about UFOs. So I think it's just going to become a really great court case that people should focus in on. But please donate to my fund, and the way to do that basically is to contact me at rkiviat@aol.com, and I'll be able to give you all the details.
So I still got to ask, Hal Puthoff was not involved in the campaign you're involved, the CIA operative you're talking about. He was not involved in the first campaign. It's different people, different government officials.
You mean to the Stars Academy?
To the campaign that you was involved in.
No. Hal Puthoff is trying to say right now that he is not involved with Firmage anymore. He was involved with Firmage back in 2009 with the same Utah investor and businessman, but he's not anymore.
So Joe was able to get new government officials to help sponsor him, to help bring in investors, to help get you in.
Yes, I would say the new guy was Ron Pandolfi, because we don't really believe that Ron Pandolfi was that involved in the earlier 2009, 2010 version that the Utah businessman and Joe Firmage together were working on. But I will say this, I find it fascinating that Hal Puthoff knows Ron Pandolfi very well. So the question is Hal Puthoff kind of playing both ends against the middle? Is he literally earlier supporting Joe Firmage, now later supporting Tom DeLonge and the To the Stars Academy, and maybe Ron Pandolfi is, wink wink, communicating to Hal Puthoff to kind of play both ends together? That's what the court case is about. We're going to try to find out where the facts are, because it looks to me very suspicious, and my attorney, that Hal Puthoff is involved in both operations.
Really? And
Ron Pandolfi and him are very close. So one has to wonder if a present CIA scientist is very friendly with Hal Puthoff and very friendly with some of the people involved here, how much is the CIA involved in all of it, including Joe Firmage, NASA, To the Stars Academy, and the slow disclosure that we're finding out about the famous Tic Tac case that the New York Times talked about in 2018, that happened in 2004, which is apparently 50-foot long, 20-foot wide, capsule-shaped UFOs came and inundated two different aircraft carrier groups. One in 2004 by San Diego, one in 2015 by Virginia and Daytona Beach in Florida. There appears to be this UFO event or events that tie into all of this, where the craft that were observed and reported on and videotaped by Navy pilots are showing anti-gravity propulsion. So it's all tied together to UFOs and anti-gravity propulsion. So you can see how it's going to be an interesting case in court, I think. Really interesting.
Robert, I appreciate it, and that's a wrap.